Thank you very much. Well, thank you for your presentation and thank you all for being here. So as you have said, I'm going to talk about the film Avatar. I'm going to stop with the first film, but if you have any comments about the second, you can bring them forward in the questions and comment section. So with that, let's begin. So this conference is called Myth in the Art. So I thought it would be interesting to show what exactly I mean or we mean when we are referring to a myth. The Merriam-Webster dictionary gives us 4 definitions. The first one is perhaps the most well-known one, a traditional story that tries to explain some sort of aspect about the world. It is, for instance, the myth about the Trojan War or Gilgamesh. But I am most interested in the second definition, a popular belief or tradition that has grown up around something or someone specially, one embodying the ideals and institutions of a society or segment of society. And I'm mainly more interested in this definition because though Athena and Zeus don't have much influence in our daily lives, myths like that of white exceptionality do have a lot of influence. Now that we have established this definition, and as Alba has said, I focus mostly on post-colonial studies, so I was interested in seeing which were the myths that powered it. And, well, as most of you will know, colonialism is a relationship of domination between a minority invader group and a majority indigenous group. So this domination usually implies a negation of the indigenous people's agency through a discourse of imperialism. And it is in this discourse that we find the series of myths that I'm interested with. So I have chosen these 4 ones. The East-West dichotomy, Western decline, the noble savage, and white savior. And the reason why I have chosen this is because I believe these are the ones that we see most frequently in depictions of colonialism, with the white savior and the noble savage being more popular in depictions of a colonial past, whereas the East-West dichotomy and Western decline are more typical of present depictions of colonialism. But I asked myself, what about the future? What myths do influence these depictions of the future? It's natural to see colonialism in depictions of the past and present, because colonialism is part of our history and defines many of the ways in which our society works nowadays. But now that we know colonialism is a bad thing, one might think that we want not to see it in our future, but it seems we do want to see it because there is such a thing as space colonialism. This is what we see in Avatar. We see a main character, Jake, a human, who's part of a technologically superior race of militarized invaders. They come from a metropolis, in this case Earth, that is in need of natural resources. And in their search for natural resources, they find a barrier that is an indigenous population, the Na'vi. The Na'vi are standing over the natural resources the humans want, and as a way to try to find a peaceful solution to this, Jake is sent to live with the Na'vi. What happens next is an interracial, or in this case, an interspecies romance, where a male invader falls in love with a female indigenous woman. And the movie ends with an organized resistance movement against the invaders that leaves us with an apparently victorious indigenous group and an apparently defeated invading group, although we know that it's hinted that it doesn't stop there. And if this sounds familiar, it's because, as per James Cameron admission, this is basically Pocahontas in space. So there is no denying that Avatar is a movie about colonialism. So I thought it would be worth it to see how myths behind colonialism are represented in this future representation, in this representation of the future. So we are going to start with the East-West dichotomy. This myth implies a belief in a fundamental separation of the world in two parts that are comparable binaries. We have on the one hand the West, the familiar West, us, that is over the strange East, them. Ultimately, what this myth implies is a belief in European exceptionality, because what we consider the West are the descendants of European invaders. Not only that, but it also implies a belief that the difference between these two sides can never be salvaged, because these two sides have very particular characteristics associated with them. These characteristics are permanent and they are intransferable. They are like an ID. We have the West with its manipulation of nature, its competition, growth and development, its championship of personal freedom, and its obsession with material wealth and social betterment through technological means and rationality. On the other hand, we have the East, that is more prone to communitarian identities, aesthetic values, and a submission of the individual to a timeless mystical whole, as well as being represented as barbaric, eccentric, and unruly. So it seems pretty clear that the movie pretends us to identify the humans with the West because they are the ones that are technologically advanced and they are much more materialistic, whereas the East is meant to be associated with the Na'vi, who are very spiritual, although sometimes they can be rather primitive with the knives and arrows, but have a tendency to a communitarian identity. The Na'vi are called Diomaticaya, which means the people. Sorry, I'm going to drink a bit, because I'm... But of course, the movie is very self-aware and knows that there are a lot of dangers in presenting one group as uniform, as homogeneous. And so they try to add a bit of nuance by showing that in both sides we have both bad and good people. But we shall see how this is not exactly that. We see that the bad humans, the military men, and the businessmen are identified with the control of nature, competition, growth and development, material wealth, that is to say, the bad West, the bad aspects of the West. Whereas the good humans, the scientists that are trying to build bridges with the Na'vi, are identified with the good West, with its freedom, social betterment through technology, and rationality. On the other hand, we have the bad Na'vi, who represent the bad aspects of the East, that of being barbaric, eccentric, and unruly. On the other side, we have the good Na'vi, like Neytiri, the female protagonist, that represent the good East. These are the Na'vi that focus more on the communitarian life, the aesthetic values, and the mysticism that are associated with the East and with the Na'vi. Okay, so let's see how this attempt at not being essentialist works, or not, or doesn't work. Well, okay. So the first myth I want to talk about is the Western decline. This is the belief that as a community, the West is constantly under threat of disappearing, but is also always progressing and improving, so that it is constantly dying, on the verge of dying and being born. So I think it's pretty easy to see how this can be used as a discursive or a narrative device that feeds on people's fears and desires. And this is precisely what happens in the movie. We have the main military chief, Miles Quaritch, who welcomes Jake when he arrives to Pandora. And the picture he paints is that the military base that they are staying at is the last standing of humanity. because it is constantly being attacked by everything around them. He says, every living thing that crawls, flies, or squats in the mud wants to kill you and eat your eyes for jujubes. He is particularly harsh when describing the threat that is posed by the Na'vi, because he describes them as being very hard to kill and being very prone to killing humans with the weapons, of having specialized weapons for them, which implies that, and he says so, that a lot of humans are going to die. The second time this idea is presented is right before the final battle. And this time, Miles Quaritch is much more explicit, stating that it is a fact that they are fighting for survival. They are fighting against the Na'vi who are trying to invade them, even though they have the technological advantage, and again he recognizes that, their only way to survive is to launch a preemptive attack that will cause some sort of collective trauma in the Na'vi. And so, kind of expectedly, the bad West and the bad humans are identified with Western decline, because it is this myth that allows them to carry out the evil or morally reprehensible actions that they carry out. Now, but what about the Na'vi? The Na'vi are supposed to be the good people, right? So we are not going to have them represented as evil. Well, let's see. The myth of the noble savage. This myth, launched by Rousseau, is the myth that in its primitive state, humanity is at equal distances from civilization and brutality. So that this person in a primitive state will only do harm as a way of self-defense. Now, this primitiveness is associated with indigenous people like the Na'vi. But as I said, Avatar is trying to avoid being essentialist. So not all the Na'vi can be noble savages. We have some that are, for instance, Moat, the shaman of the tribe, who is ecologically pure and has a deep spiritual connection with the goddess and with nature. On the other hand, we have Tsute, who is the main warrior of the tribe. He is violent, he is childish and cannot control himself, and he is represented as very, very unreasonable. And it's no coincidence that this is the romantic rival of the human protagonist. Of course, the movie is trying to escape essentialization, but they also don't want to show the Na'vi as being irredeemable. You don't want to show the good guys as just being able of being bad. So this is why Tsute does a transition from brutal to noble savage. And the way he does this is questionable. So he does this by becoming Jake's endorser. Jake gains this endorsement in a problematic way because he appropriates a cultural figure of a nation he has helped to decimate. And this figure is the Toruk Makto, the rider of the Last Shadow, a mythical figure of the Na'vi past. Not only that, but he also abuses the Na'vi's connection to their goddess, to Ewa, by presenting himself as her champion, thus manipulating them into accepting him as a messiah and following him to war and death. And Tsute does indeed die. He dies for Jake, and what is more, he dies ceding his leadership to Jake. He actually insists on Jake killing him personally because that is part of the tradition. And this is not only problematic, but also dangerous because it shows a willing acceptance to the submission of the invaders, of the colonizers. So we see that even though Jake is supposed to be a good guy, a good human, this is his way, to make an enemy of someone who has something that he wants. He wants Neytiri, but he cannot have her because Neytiri is going to marry Tsute. He wants to be accepted by the Omaticaya, and he cannot do that either because Tute won't allow it. So naturally, Tute has to go, but not before he endorses Jake. So this means that Tute, who was the sign that the authors were trying to make a more nuanced representation of the Navi, of indigenous people, ends up dying, not only dying, but becoming part of this homogenized vision of indigenous people as noble savages. And he dies, he goes defending his Western invader, which is not great. So I'm guessing you guys see where I'm going with this. The white savior. So this is the belief that a human person, a white person can present themselves as the redeemer of racialized people. This belief says that because the person is white, they can help to legitimize the existence of people of color through the acceptance that whiteness grants them. So again, not a great thing. This is precisely what we see when Jake becomes Toruk Makto. He reinvents himself as an undisputable leader by copying a mythical leader of the Navi, a leader that managed to join all the clans under one person. But he cannot erase the fact that he is a Western white man that is claiming to protect the very same people that he puts into risk. So, again, not great. It is quite difficult not to see that he has a bit of a white savior complex. And the movie is not subtle about showing him as a messiah, to say the least. This means that in the search for safety, in the fight against colonialism, the Navi have the choice of two kinds of colonialism. They can either be decimated by the bad humans, or they can accept the rulership of a white messiah. So, again, what this means ultimately is that the supposedly good humans are no less colonialist than the bad humans, because they too feel a sense of superiority over the Navi. So, to conclude, what does this mean and why does it matter to me? You may be wondering. Well, first, because despite claims that Avatar is an anti-colonial narrative, it is actually not. For once, all the subalterns exist for the benefits of the white man protagonist. They serve to revitalize him, to allow him a sense of self-fulfillment. And they also reinforce the narrative of white supremacy by accepting a white savior as the new leader. And Jake does say explicitly that he is using them. He says, I needed their help and they needed mine. I need their help because I need to feel fulfilled. They need me because I am a white messiah that can legitimize their existence. Second is that despite James Cameron's attempts at representing the white people and indigenous people are more nuanced, he ends up falling into the same myths of imperialistic discourse. Indeed, when Jake becomes one of the people, he is officially an Omaticaya. It seems that he cannot escape the scientific bias of the West. He says, I'm probably just talking to a tree right now. And this is just after he has connected and he has actually seen that those things are real. But he cannot escape it because this is mysticism and Navi religiousness, and science tells us that is bad and not acceptable. Last, that colonial power dynamics cannot be escaped no matter the good intentions of the people involved. we see this in the scientists. The scientists are trying to protect the Navi that are supposed to be the good guys, the good humans, continue to judge what is worthy to be believed through their dogmas, their scientific dogmas. And according to this, mysticism is bad. So, and they continue to look for some sort of wealth. So, why does this matter? Well, because it sets a precedent for present and future intercultural relationships. Because a colonial narrative like this that presents violence to the subaltern and their oppression as natural influences the audience's perception of otherness in their own circles. And without actual aliens, these people will resort to exercising this violence and oppression over the subalterns that are near them, the figurative aliens. It is a mistake to think that because this is science fiction and it is something that doesn't exist, there's a future that doesn't exist, it doesn't matter what it shows. It is precisely because it is science fiction, because it is a hypothetical future that we have made, that we should be worried that we continue to exercise violence upon the subaltern and are unable to imagine a future without the myths that backed colonialism and that continue to back colonialism nowadays. Okay, so this is the works I used. And if any of you have any questions right now, I will be very glad to answer.
Thank you very much to both. These were absolutely amazing presentations. And I like to ask Natalia about one thing that I couldn't help recalling when listening to your presentation, and it is the disturbing fact of the disturbing fact behind the concept of the film, of the entire film and the entire narrative, which is called Avatar. And what do you think about the colonization, not only of the culture and of the space, but of the body? What do you think about the idea of alien people, which in this case being human beings, possessing artificial aboriginal bodies in order to colonize from within? Thank you very much.
Well, that's an excellent question, and I definitely have to think a lot about it. But straight away, I would say it just goes to show that even this belief that technology will always bring us good things, this belief in progress, technology is a tool, and it depends who uses that tool. I do not think it is exactly wrong for people who want to study for instance, Pandora to wear the avatar suits, because I think that would help them survive. As we have seen, humans are rather helpless in that planet. But as you say, it is truly disturbing that a colonizer thinks they can change their identity, their past, the things they do with that body, just because at the end of the movie they become an avatar. Not to talk about the fact that the reason why he likes being an avatar is not only because of colonialist reasons, it's also because of ableistic reasons, because Jake is in a wheelchair. And again, not to speak of the age difference between Neytiri and Jake, because we don't know how old Jake is, but Neytiri is 18. And Jake is not 18. Like his avatar body may be very young because it just takes 6 years to grow to adulthood in the little pods, but dang, the more you look at it, the creepier it gets. Yeah, so thanks for your question. I think it was wonderful, and it allowed me to speak about some things that I had in my mind but couldn't think.
Thank you very much.
My question is kind of off of what he asked, and goes to Natalia presentation. So I talk about Avatar in my work as well, but not as extensively as you have. I'm thinking about a couple of things. But how much does post-colonial theorizing go into your actual study? So I'm thinking, Fanon, I know you highlight Said's Orientalism in some ways with the whole East and West mapping that you bring out. But more to the point of bodies, right? Do you think that the fact that Jake is paralyzed from the waist down, right, in the text, does it add anything to your reading of Jake? Is it in any way redemptive of the colonializing rhetoric that you talk about? So Jake cannot move in the world, in the actual world or on Earth, right? But when he's in the avatar state, he has mobility. Does it help in any way that Jake is paralyzed, if that makes sense?
Okay, thank you for your question. Again, great questions. So I think it actually misrepresents what we can do against colonialism. Jake is not helpless because he's in a wheelchair. People are not helpless because they have some sort of disability. He can talk, he can speak, and it is from that wheelchair that he accepts to be an agent of the military men inside the Navi tribe. So for me, that is not... It actually makes it worse because he thinks that it is that ability to walk again that allows him to fight. And that is just not true. I mean, I understand that maybe he is subject to a system of ableism that maybe doesn't allow him to do as much as he could do, but he didn't have any problem with colonialism until he fell in love. Even when he connects with Ewa and sees that this is true, he seems unable to see the Navi as individual people apart from Neytiri. And this is something, again, I mentioned the second film, I feel like this is something that it brings, that the authors bring to the second film. That is his problem. His problem is not so much that he is a white man, is that he is unable to see the Navi as people, as individual people. He continues to see them as this mass. And we also see them as mass. We know the names of 3 Navis? So, I think it makes it worse because it misrepresents what we can do against colonialism nowadays.
My question also goes to you, Natalia, in regards of the previous questions, because oftentimes when we talk about Avatar, there is a term that comes to my mind that is fetishization, or how it's pronounced in English. And the fact of the connection, how to connect with people. I remember watching this film when I was way younger and when it was uncensored. And I remember it was all about how exotic and how fetishizable these bodies could be, as well as their tribe, as well as their mentality, both as individual and as a mass. There's this bodily aspect that bothers me and keeps bothering me every time I watch this movie. And I was wondering about your thoughts on that.
Thank you for your question. They are definitely fetishized. They are fetishized in the same way that we have movies like Eat, Pray, Love or The Great Hotel Marigold that has a white person going to the global south or to indigenous people to feel themselves again, to find themselves. Like basically the same thing, but in a space. And as for the bodies, I do think they kind of tried to make them more like they tried to make them more or less genderless, but they failed, and you can see that particularly in the things they released afterwards. Like some weeks ago, I went to, in Vizcaya, there was a statue of Neytiri, and I noticed that they had made her backside and her breasts extremely big. And it shocked me because when I watched the movie, I thought, okay, they are making her have small breasts as a way to maybe not fetishize the fact that she's naked. But like, does it really make sense for her to be naked? She is surrounded by nature, things can bite her. Shouldn't she be, I don't know, for practical reasons? So yeah, the fetishization is there. Like, it's unavoidable, not just in the exoticism of it all, but in the bodies themselves. And also, it's very interesting to me that the men seem to have no genitals whatsoever, but we see Jake having relationships with Neytiri, and we see him in a not very nice scene. We see him trying to, I don't know how to describe it, to wear the underwear, and it bothers him because it's uncomfortable on his backside, right? He takes the string out. So we are placed like Neytiri and Jake are the only ones that have a gender or a sexual identity in a way. The rest are just sexless, as one of the characters called them blue monkeys. So yeah, again, not great.